Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we dive into one of the most dramatic political storms currently shaking Israel to its core. The headline says it all: Netanyahu, who cornered, far-right fury and families' anger ignite over ceasefire chaos. This story is not just about Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's longest-serving prime minister. It's about the fragile state of Israeli politics, the deep divisions within society, and the growing pressure from multiple sides that is threatening to tear apart the government itself. The backdrop begins with Israel's latest military operations in Gaza. After weeks of devastating conflict, the international community, including the United States, the European Union, and the United Nations, began pushing hard for a ceasefire. Eventually, under intense pressure, Netanyahu's government agreed to a temporary ceasefire deal. But instead of calming the storm, this truce triggered an explosion of political and social backlash. Far-right politicians accused Netanyahu of surrendering to Hamas. They claim that pausing military operations gave the militant group breathing room, allowing them to regroup and strengthen. On the other side, families of hostages, those whose loved ones are still being held in Gaza, erupted in anger. For them, the ceasefire did not guarantee the safe return of their relatives. Many felt betrayed, abandoned, and ignored by their own government. What was meant to be a political solution became a firestorm of accusations, protests, and divisions. Netanyahu, who now finds himself trapped in a political nightmare, on one side, his far-right coalition partners, who helped keep him in power, are furious. Ministers like Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich have openly criticized the ceasefire, threatening to abandon the coalition if Netanyahu, who shows any further signs of compromise. On the other side, hostage families are leading powerful protests outside the Prime Minister's residence, demanding action. Their message is simple: no ceasefire is acceptable unless it guarantees the safe return of their loved ones. For Netanyahu, this is an impossible balancing act. If he leans toward the far right, he risks losing international support and facing growing isolation on the global stage. If he bends to public anger and prioritizes negotiations, he risks shattering his fragile coalition and potentially losing his grip on power. Families of hostages have become one of the loudest voices in this crisis. Every day, they gather in the streets, waving pictures of their missing loved ones, chanting slogans, and demanding accountability. Some families accuse the government of using their relatives as pawns in a larger political game. Others say Netanyahu, who is more concerned with saving his own political career than with bringing home the hostages. The human stories are heartbreaking. Parents have described sleepless nights, children asking when their fathers or mothers will return, and the unbearable silence of not knowing whether their loved ones are alive or dead. Their pain has ignited public sympathy, fueling larger protests that have spread across Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and other major cities. The growing pressure is making it impossible for Netanyahu to ignore them. Meanwhile, Netanyahu, whose far-right allies are seething with rage. For them, the ceasefire is a humiliation, a signal of weakness at a time when they believe Israel must show strength. Figures like Ben-Gvir have threatened to pull their support from the coalition. They argue that halting military action rewards Hamas and undermines Israel's security. Some have even suggested that Netanyahu, who has betrayed the principles of Zionism itself by bowing to international pressure. This fury is not just rhetoric, it's a real political threat. Without the backing of his far-right allies, Netanyahu's government could collapse, forcing Israel into yet another round of elections. The world is also watching closely. The Biden administration has been pushing for de-escalation, fearing that the conflict could spiral into a regional war. European leaders have echoed similar calls, demanding that Israel and Hamas step back from the brink. For Netanyahu, international support is crucial. Israel relies heavily on U.S. military aid and diplomatic backing. But here's the problem: the more he bends to international demands for a ceasefire, the more he angers his domestic far-right partners. This is the essence of Netanyahu's dilemma. He is cornered, caught between global diplomacy and internal political chaos. Behind the scenes, reports suggest that Netanyahu, who has been scrambling to hold his coalition together. Closed-door meetings have turned heated, with ministers shouting, threatening, and accusing one another of betrayal. Some insiders say Netanyahu, who has been making private promises to different sides, telling the far right he won't allow Hamas to regroup, while assuring hostage families he's committed to negotiations. But this strategy may backfire. You can't keep everyone happy when their demands are directly opposed. At some point, Netanyahu, who will have to choose a side, and whichever side he chooses, the consequences could be catastrophic for his leadership. Beyond politics, ordinary Israelis are exhausted. The country has been living under constant tension. Rocket sirens, military mobilizations, fear of escalation, and now the uncertainty of whether hostages will return. Polls show that public trust in the government is sinking. Many believe Netanyahu, who has lost his way, prioritizing his political survival over the nation's long-term security. Others argue that the government has no clear strategy, lurching between war and ceasefire with no consistent vision. The anger is boiling, and it is not limited to one side. Some demand harsher military action. Others demand peace negotiations. The only thing uniting them is frustration with Netanyahu's leadership. Israel's opposition parties see Netanyahu's weakness as an opportunity. Leaders like Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz have criticized the Prime Minister for mishandling the crisis. They accuse him of bowing to extremists in his coalition and failing to show real leadership. Gantz, who has often positioned himself as a moderate alternative, has called for a national responsibility government that puts the people's interests above political survival. If Netanyahu's coalition collapses, the opposition will be ready to step in, potentially reshaping Israeli politics in dramatic ways. The situation remains highly unstable. Several possible scenarios could unfold. Netanyahu's coalition could collapse, plunging Israel back into elections. Protests could escalate, making his position untenable. A new round of military escalation could break out if Hamas resumes attacks during the ceasefire, or international powers could intervene more strongly, forcing Netanyahu into concessions that alienate his allies. In every scenario, Netanyahu's future looks increasingly bleak. This crisis is not just about one ceasefire or one politician. It reflects the deeper fractures in Israeli society. The far right demands uncompromising strength. Families demand compassion and accountability. The international community demands restraint. Netanyahu, once a master political survivor, is now struggling to balance these impossible demands. His iron grip on power is slipping, and the chaos surrounding the ceasefire may be remembered as the moment his leadership began to unravel. So, what do we take from all this? Netanyahu, who is cornered like never before. His far-right partners are furious, hostage families are heartbroken and enraged, the public is restless, and the international community is watching closely. This is not just political drama. It's a turning point in Israeli history. Whether Netanyahu survives or not, the anger and divisions ignited by this ceasefire will shape the future of Israel for years to come.